A minister died and was waiting in line at the pearly gates. Ahead of him was a guy in sunglasses, a loud shirt, leather jacket, and jeans. St. Peter asked the guy, "Who are you, so that I may know whether or not to admit you to the kingdom of heaven?" The guy replied, "I'm Joe Cohen, taxi driver, New York City." St. Peter consulted his list, smiled, and said, "Take this silken robe and golden staff, and enter the kingdom of heaven." The taxi driver entered heaven with his robe and staff, and it was the minister's turn. He stood erect and boomed out, "I am Joseph Snow, a pastor of St. Mary's for the last 43 years. St. Peter consulted his list and said, "Take this cotton robe and wooden staff and enter the kingdom of heaven." "Just a minute," said the minister. "That man was a taxi driver, and he got a silk robe and golden staff. How can this be?" "Up here we work by results," said St. Peter. "While you preached, people slept. While he drove, people prayed." A woman meets a man in a bar, they talk, they connect, they end up leaving together. They get back to his place and he shows her around his apartment. She notices that one wall of his bedroom is completely filled with soft, sweet, cuddly teddy bears. There are 3 shelves in the bedroom with hundreds and hundreds of cute, cuddly teddy bears carefully placed in rows, covering the entire wall. It was obvious that he had taken quite some time to lovingly arrange them, and she was immediately touched by the amount of thought he had put into organizing the display. There were small bears all along the bottom shelf, medium-sized bears covering the length of the middle shelf, and huge, enormous bears running all the way along the top shelf. She found it strange for an obviously masculine guy to have such a large collection of teddy bears. She is quite impressed by his sensitive side, but she doesn't mention this to him. They share a bottle of wine and continue talking, and after a while, she finds herself thinking, "Oh my God, maybe this guy could be the one. Just maybe, this could be the future father of my children." She turns to him and kisses him lightly on the lips. He responds warmly, and they continue to kiss. The passion builds, and he romantically lifts her in his arms and carries her into his bedroom, where they rip off each other's clothes and make hot, steamy love. She is so overwhelmed that she responds with more passion, more creativity, more heat than she has ever known. After an intense, explosive night of raw passion with this sensitive guy, they are lying there together in the afterglow. The woman rolls over, gently strokes his chest, and asks coyly, "Well, how was it?" The guy gently smiles at her, strokes her cheek, looks deeply into her eyes, and says, "Help yourself to any prize from the middle shelf." A woman goes to the doctor, worried about her husband's temper. The doctor asks, "What's the problem?" The woman says, "Doctor, I don't know what to do. Every day my husband seems to lose his temper for no reason. It scares me." The doctor says, "I have a cure for that. When it seems that your husband is getting angry, just take a glass of water and start swishing it in your mouth. Just swish and swish, but don't swallow it until he either leaves the room or calms down." 2 weeks later, the woman comes back to the doctor looking fresh and reborn. The woman says, "Doctor, that was a brilliant idea. Every time my husband started losing it, I swished with water. I swished and swished, and he calmed right down. How does a glass of water do that?" The doctor says, "The water itself does nothing. It's keeping your mouth shut that does the trick." 3 sons left home, went out on their own, and prospered. Getting together for Christmas, they discussed the gifts they were able to give their elderly mother. The first said, "I built a big house for our mother." The second said, "I sent her a Mercedes." The third smiled and said, "I've got you both beat. You remember how Mom enjoyed reading the Bible? And you know she can't see very well. So I sent her a remarkable parrot that recites the entire Bible. It took elders in the church 12 years to teach him. He's one of a kind. Mom just has to name the chapter and verse, and the parrot recites it." Soon thereafter, Mom sent out her letters of thanks. "Dear Milton," she wrote one son, "the house you built is too huge. I live in only one room, but I have to keep the whole house clean. Dear Gerald," she wrote to another, "I am too old to travel. I stay at home most of the time, so I rarely use the Mercedes. Dearest Donald," she wrote to her third son, "you have the good sense to know what your mother likes. The chicken was delicious." One night, 4 college students were out partying late night and didn't study for the test, which was scheduled for the next day. In the morning, they thought of a plan. They made themselves look dirty with grease and dirt. They then went up to the dean and said that they had gone out to a wedding last night, and on their return, the tire of their car burst, and they had to push the car all the way back and that they were in no condition to take the test. So the dean said they can have the retest after 3 days. They thanked him and said they will be ready by that time. On the 3rd day, they appeared before the dean. The dean said that, as this was a special condition test, all 4 were required to sit in separate classrooms for the test. They all agreed as they had prepared well in the last 3 days. The test consisted of 2 questions with a total of 100 marks. Q1, your name. Q2, 2 marks. Q2, which tire burst? 98 marks. A, front. Left, B, front right. C, back left. D, back right. A wealthy old lady decides to go on a photo safari in Africa, taking her poodle along for company. One day, the poodle starts chasing butterflies and, before long, discovers that he's lost. Wandering about, he notices a hungry-looking leopard heading rapidly in his direction. The poodle thinks, "Oh!" Noticing some bones on the ground close by, he immediately settles down to chew on the bones with his back to the approaching cat. Just as the leopard is about to leap, the poodle exclaims loudly, "Boy, that was one delicious leopard! I wonder if there are any more around here." Hearing this, the leopard halts his attack in mid-strike. A look of terror comes over him and he slinks away into the trees. "Whew!" says the leopard. "That was close. That poodle nearly had me." Meanwhile, a monkey who had been watching the whole scene from a nearby tree figures he can put this knowledge to good use and trade it for protection from the leopard. So off he goes, but the poodle sees him heading after the leopard with great speed and figures that something must be up. The monkey soon catches up with the leopard, spills the beans, and strikes a deal for himself with the leopard. The leopard is furious at being made a fool of and says, "Here, monkey, hop on my back so you can watch me chew that poodle to bits." Now, the poodle sees the leopard coming with the monkey on his back and thinks, "What am I going to do now?" But instead of running, the dog sits down with his back to his attackers, pretending he hasn't seen them yet, and waits until they get just close enough to hear. "Where's that damn monkey?" the poodle says. "I sent him off an hour ago to bring me another leopard." 2 young guys appear in court after being arrested for smoking dope. The judge says, "You seem like nice young men, and I'd like to give you a second chance instead of jail time. I want you to go out this weekend and try to convince others of the evils of drug use. I'll see you back in court Monday." On Monday, the judge asks the first guy, "How did you do over the weekend?" "Well, Your Honor, I persuaded 17 people to give up drugs forever." 17 people? That's wonderful. How did you do it?" "I used a diagram, Your Honor. I drew 2 circles like this. O. Then I told them that the big circle is your brain before drugs, and the small circle is your brain after drugs." "That's admirable," says the judge. Then he turns to the second guy. "And how did you do?" "Well, Your Honor, I persuaded 156 people to give up drugs forever." "Wow," says the judge. 156 people. How did you manage to do that?" "Well, I used a similar diagram," the guy says. "I drew 2 circles like this. O. Then I pointed to the little circle and said, 'This is your asshole before prison.'" A businessman was interviewing job applications for the position of manager of a large division. He quickly devised a test for choosing the most suitable candidate. He simply asked each applicant this question: "What is 2 plus 2? The first interviewee was a journalist. His answer was 22. The second was a social worker. She said, "I don't know the answer, but I'm very glad that we had the opportunity to discuss it." The third applicant was an engineer. He pulled out a slide rule and came up with an answer somewhere between 3.999 and 4.01. Next came an attorney. He stated that, in the case of Jenkins versus the Department of the Treasury, 2 plus 2 was proven to be 4. Finally, the businessman interviewed an accountant. When he asked him what 2 plus 2 was, the accountant got up from his chair, went over to the door, closed it, came back, and sat down. Leaning across the desk, he said in a low voice, "How much do you want it to be?" He got the job. DEA officer stops at a ranch in Texas and talks with an old rancher. He tells the rancher, "I need to inspect your ranch for illegally-grown drugs." The rancher says, "Okay, but do not go in that field over there," as he points out the location. The DEA officer verbally explodes, saying, "Mister, I have the authority of the federal government with me." Reaching into his rear pants pocket, he removes his badge and proudly displays it to the rancher. "See this badge? This badge means I am allowed to go wherever I wish, on any land. No questions asked or answers given. Have I made myself clear? Do you understand?" The rancher nods politely, apologizes, and goes about his chores. A short time later, the old rancher hears loud screams and sees the DEA officer running for his life, chased by the rancher's big Santa Gertrudis bull. With every step, the bull is gaining ground on the officer, and it seems likely that he'll get gored before he reaches safety. The officer is clearly terrified. The rancher throws down his tools, runs to the fence, and yells at the top of his lungs, "Your badge! Show him your badge!" One day, Bill complained to his friend that his elbow really hurt. His friend suggested that he go to a computer at the drugstore that can diagnose anything quicker and cheaper than a doctor. Simply put in a sample of your urine, and the computer will diagnose your problem and tell you what you can do about it. It only costs $10. Bill figured he had nothing to lose, so he filled a jar with a urine sample and went to the drugstore. Finding the computer, he poured in the sample and deposited the $10. The computer started making some noise and various lights started flashing. After a brief pause, out popped a small slip of paper on which was printed, "You have tennis elbow. Soak your arm in warm water. Avoid heavy lifting. It will be better in 2 weeks." Later that evening, while thinking how amazing this new technology was and how it would change medical science forever, he began to wonder if this machine could be fooled. He mixed together some tap water, a stool sample from his dog, and urine samples from his wife and daughter. To top it off, he masturbated into the concoction. He went back to the drugstore, located the machine, poured in the sample, and deposited the $10. The computer again made the usual noise and printed out the following message: "Your tap water is too hard. Get a water softener. Your dog has worms. Get him vitamins. Your daughter is using cocaine. Put her in a rehabilitation clinic. Your wife is pregnant with twin girls. They aren't yours. Get a lawyer. And if you don't stop jerking off, your tennis elbow will never get better." A crowded city at a busy bus stop, a beautiful young woman wearing a tight leather skirt was waiting for a bus. As the bus stopped and it was her turn to get on, she became aware that her skirt was too tight to allow her leg to come up to the height of the first step of the bus. Slightly embarrassed and with a quick smile to the bus driver, she reached behind her to unzip her skirt a little, thinking that this would give her enough slack to raise her leg. She tried to again take the step, only to discover that she couldn't. So, a little more embarrassed, she once again reached behind her to unzip her skirt a little more, and for the second time, attempted the step. Once again, much to her embarrassment, she could not raise her leg. With a little smile to the driver, she again reached behind to unzip a little more, and again was unable to take the step. About this time, a large guy who was standing behind her picked her up easily by the waist and placed her gently on the step of the bus. Bill went ballistic and turned to the would-be Samaritan and screeched, "How dare you touch my body? I don't even know who you are." The guy smiled and drawled, "Well, ma'am, normally I would agree with you, but after you unzipped my fly 3 times, I kind of figured we were friends." A man is getting into the shower just as his wife is finishing up her shower when the doorbell rings. The wife quickly wraps herself in a towel and runs downstairs. When she opens the door, there stands Bob, the next-door neighbor. Before she says a word, Bob says, I'll give you $800 to drop that towel. After thinking for a moment, the woman drops her towel and stands naked in front of Bob. After a few seconds, Bob hands her $800 and leaves. The woman wraps back up in the towel and goes back upstairs. When she gets to the bathroom, her husband asks, "Who was that?" "It was Bob, the next-door neighbor," she replies. "Great," the husband says. "Did he say anything about the $800 he owes me?" Moral of the story: if you share critical information pertaining to credit and risk with your shareholders in time, you may be in a position to prevent avoidable exposure. An American soldier, serving in World War II, had just returned from several weeks of intense action on the German front lines. He had finally been granted R&R and was on a train bound for London. The train was very crowded, so the soldier walked the length of the train looking for an empty seat. The only unoccupied seat was directly adjacent to a well-dressed middle-aged lady and was being used by her little dog. The war-weary soldier asked, "Please, ma'am, may I sit in that seat?" The Englishwoman looked down her nose at the soldier, sniffed, and said, "You Americans, you're such a rude class of people. Can't you see my little Fifi is using that seat?" The soldier walked away, determined to find a place to rest, but after another trip down to the end of the train, found himself again facing the woman with the dog. Again he asked, "Please, lady, may I sit there? I'm very tired." The Englishwoman wrinkled her nose and snorted, "You Americans, not only are you rude, you're also arrogant. Imagine." The soldier didn't say anything else. He leaned over, picked up the little dog, tossed it out the window of the train, and sat down in the empty seat. The woman shrieked and railed and demanded that someone defend her and chastise the soldier. An English gentleman sitting across the aisle spoke up, "You know, sir, you Americans do seem to have a penchant for doing the wrong thing. You eat holding the fork in the wrong hand. You drive your cars on the wrong side of the road. And now, sir, you've thrown the wrong bitch out the window." An old blind cowboy wanders into an all-girl biker bar by mistake. He finds his way to a bar stool and orders a shot of Jack Daniels. After sitting there for a while, he yells to the bartender, "Hey, you want to hear a blonde joke?" The bar immediately falls absolutely silent. In a very deep, husky voice, the woman next to him says, "Before you tell that joke, cowboy, I think it is only fair, given that you are blind, that you should know 5 things. The bartender is a blonde girl with a baseball bat. The bouncer is a blonde girl with a billy club. I'm a 6-foot-tall, 175-pound blonde woman with a black belt in karate. The woman sitting next to me is blonde and a professional weightlifter. The lady to your right is blonde and a professional wrestler. Now, think about it seriously, cowboy. Do you still want to tell that blonde joke?" The blind cowboy thinks for a second, shakes his head and mutters, "No, not if I'm going to have to explain it 5 times. 2 Marines boarded a quick shuttle flight out of Dallas, headed for Houston. One sat in the window seat, the other sat in the middle seat. Just before takeoff, an Army soldier got on and took the aisle seat next to the 2 Marines. The soldier kicked off his shoes, wiggled his toes, and was settling in when the Marine in the window seat said, "I think I'll get up and get a Coke." "No problem," said the soldier. "I'll get it for you." While he was gone, the Marine picked up the soldier's shoe and spit in it. When the soldier returned with the Coke, the Marine in the middle seat said, "That looks good. I think I'll have one too." Again, the soldier obligingly went to fetch it, and while he was gone, the Marine picked up the soldier's other shoe and spit in it. The soldier returned, and they all sat back and enjoyed the rest of the short flight to Houston. As the plane was landing, the soldier slipped his feet into his shoes and knew immediately what had happened. "How long must this go on?" the soldier asked. "This fighting between our services? This hatred? This animosity? This spitting in shoes and peeing in Cokes?" A mature, over 40 lady gets pulled over for speeding. Older woman. "Is there a problem, officer?" Officer. "Ma'am, you were speeding." Older woman. "Oh, I see." Officer. "Can I see your license, please?" Older woman. "I'd give it to you, but I don't have one." Officer, don't have one. Older woman, lost it 4 years ago for drunk driving. Officer, can I see your vehicle registration papers, please? Older woman, I can't do that. Officer, why not? Older woman, I stole this car. Officer, stole it. Older woman, yes, and I killed and hacked up the owner. Officer, you what? Older woman, his body parts are in plastic bags in the trunk if you want to see. The officer looks at the woman and slowly backs away to his car and calls for backup. Within minutes, 5 police cars circle the car. A senior officer slowly approaches the car, clasping his half-drawn gun. Officer 2, ma'am, could you step out of your vehicle, please? The woman steps out of her vehicle. Older woman, is there a problem, sir? Officer, one of my officers told me that you have stolen this car and murdered the owner. Older woman, murdered the owner? Officer, yes. Could you please open the trunk of your car, please? The woman opens the trunk, revealing nothing but an empty trunk. Officer, is this your car, ma'am? Older woman, yes. Here are the registration papers. The officer is quite stunned. Officer, one of my officers claims that you do not have a driving license. The woman digs into her handbag and pulls out a clutch purse and hands it to the officer. The officer examines the license. He looks quite puzzled. Officer, thank you, ma'am. One of my officers told me you didn't have a license, that you stole this car, and that you murdered and hacked up the owner. Older woman, bet the liar told you I was speeding too. A Marine general, an Army general, and a Navy admiral were discussing who had the toughest men. The Army general says, all right, I'll prove the Army has the toughest men in the country. Private, get over here. The private reports as ordered. Yes, sir. The general says, see that man over there? Kill him. Without hesitating, the private kills the man. The general says, see, that man has balls. The Marine general says, that's nothing. Private, get over here. The Marine private reports, yes, sir. The Marine general says, see that man over there? Kill him and then kill yourself. Without blinking, the Marine private pulls out his M16 and blows away the guy, then turns the rifle on himself and unloads several rounds. The Marine general says, see, now that man has balls. The admiral says, that's nothing. He calls to a seaman high up on a tower. Hey, seaman, jump off that tower. The seaman answers, excuse me, sir. The admiral repeats, jump off that tower. The seaman replies, fuck you, sir. The admiral says, see, that man has balls, and he's got brains too. A wife arrived home after a long shopping trip and was horrified to find her husband in bed with a young, lovely thing. Just as she was about to storm out of the house, her husband stopped her with these words, before you leave, I want you to hear how this all came about. Driving home, I saw this young girl, looking poor and tired. I offered her a ride. She was hungry, so I brought her home and fed her some of the roast you had forgotten about in the refrigerator. Her shoes were worn out, so I gave her a pair of your shoes you didn't wear because they were out of style. She was cold, so I gave her that new birthday sweater you never wore even once because the color didn't suit you. Her slacks were worn out, so I gave her a pair of yours that you don't fit into anymore. Then, as she was about to leave the house, she paused and asked, is there anything else that your wife doesn't use anymore? And so, here we are. Little Johnny comes home from Sunday school with a black eye. His father sees it and says, Johnny, how many times do I have to tell you not to fight with the other boys? But Dad, it wasn't my fault. We were all in church saying our prayers. We all stood up and my teacher in front of me had her dress in the crack of her butt. I reached over and pulled it out. That's when she hit me. Johnny, the father said, you don't do those kind of things to women. Sure enough, the very next Sunday, Johnny came home with the other eye, black and blue. Johnny's father said, Johnny, I thought we had a talk. But Dad, Johnny said, it wasn't my fault. There we were in church saying our prayers. We all stood up and my teacher in front of us had her dress in the crack of her butt. Then Louie, who was sitting next to me, saw it and he reached over and pulled it out. Now I know she doesn't like this, so I pushed it back in. A British general had sent some of his men off to fight for their country in the Falkland Island crisis. Upon returning to England from the South American island, 3 soldiers that had distinguished themselves in battle were summoned to the general's office. "Since we weren't actually at war," the general began, "I can't give out any medals. We did, however, want to let each of you know your efforts were appreciated. What we've decided to do is to let each of you choose 2 points on your body. You will be given 2 pounds sterling for each inch of distance between those parts. We'll start on the left, boys, so what'll it be?" Soldier 1. "The tip of me head to me toes, sar." General. "Very good, son. That's 70 inches, which comes to 140 pounds. Soldier. "The tip of the finger and 1 outstretched hand to the tip of the other, sir." General. "Even better, son. That's 72 inches, which comes to 144 pounds. Soldier. "The palm of me hand to the tip of me left pinky, sire." General. "That's a strange but fair request, son." As the general begins the measurement. "What? Son, where is your left pinky?" Soldier 3. "Falkland Island, sire." One day at the end of class, little Johnny's teacher asks the class to go home and think of a story to be concluded with the moral of that story. The following day, the teacher asks for the first volunteer to tell their story. Little Susie raises her hand. "My dad owns a farm, and every Sunday we load the chicken eggs on the truck and drive into town to sell them at the market. Well, one Sunday we hit a big bump and all the eggs flew out of the basket and onto the road." When the teacher asked for the moral of the story, Susie replied, "Don't keep all your eggs in one basket." Little Lucy went next. "My dad owns a farm too. Every weekend, we take the chicken eggs and put them in the incubator. Last weekend, only 8 of the 12 eggs hatched." Again, the teacher asked for the moral of the story. Lucy replied, "Don't count your chickens before they hatch." Next up was little Johnny. "My Uncle Ted fought in the Vietnam War and his plane was shot down over enemy territory. He jumped out before it crashed, but could only take a case of beer, a machine gun, and a machete. On the way down, he drank the case of beer. Then he landed right in the middle of 100 Vietnamese soldiers. He shot 70 with his machine gun, but then he ran out of bullets. So he pulled out his machete and killed 20 more. Then the blade on his machete broke, so he killed the last 10 with his bare hands." The teacher looked a little shocked. After clearing her throat, she asked what possible moral there could be to this story. "Well," Johnny replied, "don't fuck with Uncle Ted when he's been drinking." Before going to Europe on business, a man drove his Rolls Royce to a downtown NY City bank and went in to ask for an immediate loan of $5,000. The loan officer was quite taken aback and requested collateral. "Well then, here are the keys to my Rolls Royce," the man said. The loan officer promptly had the car driven into the bank's underground parking for safekeeping and gave him $5,000. 2 weeks later, the man walked through the bank's doors and asked to settle up his loan and get his car back. The loan officer checked the records and told him that will be $5,000 in principal and $15.40 in interest. The man wrote out a check, thanked the loan officer, and started to walk away. "Wait, sir," the loan officer said. "While you were gone, I found out you are a millionaire. Why in the world would you need to borrow?" The man smiled. "Where else could I securely park my Rolls Royce in Manhattan for 2 weeks and pay only $15.40? An 85-year-old man was requested by his doctor for a sperm count as part of his physical exam. The doctor gave the man a jar and said, "Take this jar home and bring back a semen sample tomorrow." The next day, the 85-year-old man reappeared at the doctor's office and gave him the jar, which was as clean and empty as on the previous day. The doctor asked what happened, and the man explained. "Well, doc, it's like this. First, I tried with my right hand, but nothing. Then I tried with my left hand, but still nothing. Then I asked my wife for help. She tried with her right hand, then with her left, still nothing. She tried with her mouth, first with the teeth in, then with her teeth out, still nothing. We even called up Arlene, the lady next door, and she tried too. First with both hands, then an armpit, and she even tried squeezing it between her knees, but still nothing." The doctor was shocked. "You asked your neighbor?" The old man replied, "Yep, none of us could get the jar open." A man in Scotland calls his son in London the day before Christmas Eve and says, "I hate to ruin your day, but I have to tell you that your mother and I are divorcing. 45 years of misery is enough." "Dad, what are you talking about?" the son screams. "We can't stand the sight of each other any longer," the father says. "We're sick of each other, and I'm sick of talking about this, so you call your sister in Leeds and tell her." Frantically, the son calls his sister, who explodes on the phone. "Like hell, they're getting divorced," she shouts. "I'll take care of this." She calls Scotland immediately and screams at her father, "You are not getting divorced. Don't do a single thing until I get there. I'm calling my brother back, and we'll both be there tomorrow. Until then, don't do a thing. Do you hear me?" And hangs up. The old man hangs up his phone and turns to his wife. "Sorted. They're coming for Christmas, and they're paying their own way." Jim decided to propose to Sandy, but prior to her acceptance. Sandy had to confess to her man about her childhood illness. She informed Jim that she suffered a disease that left her breasts at maturity of 12 years old. He stated that it was okay because he loved her so much. "I too have a problem. My penis is the same size as an infant, and I hope you could deal with that once we are married," she said. "Yes, I will marry you and learn to live with your infant penis." Sandy and Jim got married, and they could not wait, so Jim whisked Sandy off to their hotel suite and they started touch-teasing, holding one another. As Sandy put her hands in Jim's pants, she began to scream and ran out of the room. Jim ran after her to find out what was wrong. She said, "You told me your penis was the size of an infant." "Yes, it is. 8 pounds, 7 ounces, 19 inches long." A young man goes into a drugstore to buy condoms. The pharmacist says the condoms come in packs of 3, 9, or 12 and asks which the young man wants. "Well, he said, "I've been seeing this girl for a while, and she's really hot. I want the condoms because I think tonight's the night. We're having dinner with her parents, and then we're going out, and I've got a feeling I'm going to get lucky after that. Once she's had me, she'll want me all the time, so you'd better give me the 12-pack. The young man makes his purchase and leaves. Later that evening, he sits down to dinner with his girlfriend and her parents. He asks if he might give the blessing, and they agree. He begins the prayer, but continues praying for several minutes. The girl leans over to him and says, "You never told me that you were such a religious person." The boy leans over to her and whispers, "You never told me that your father is a pharmacist." Fred and Mary got married, but can't afford a honeymoon, so they go back to Fred's parents' home for their first night together. In the morning, Johnny, Fred's little brother, gets up and has his breakfast. As he is going out of the door to go to school, he asks his mom if Fred and Mary are up yet. She replies, "No." Johnny asks, "Do you know what I think?" His mom replies, "I don't want to hear what you think. Just go to school." Johnny comes home for lunch and asks his mom, "Are Fred and Mary up yet?" She replies, "No." Johnny says, Do you know what I think?" His mom replies, "Never mind what you think. Eat your lunch and go back to school." After school, Johnny comes home and asks again, "Are Fred and Mary up yet?" His mom says, "No." He asks, "Do you know what I think?" His mom replies, "Okay, do tell me what you think." He says, "Last night Fred came to my room for the Vaseline, and I think I gave him my airplane glue." A newlywed couple moves into their new house. One day, the husband comes home from work, and his wife says, "Honey, in the upstairs bathroom, one of the pipes is leaking. Could you fix it?" The husband says, "What do I look like, Mr. Plumber?" A few days go by, and he comes home from work, and his wife says, "Honey, the car won't start. I think it needs a new battery. Could you change it for me?" He says, "What do I look like, Mr. Goodwrench?" Another few days go by, and it's raining pretty hard. The wife finds a leak in the roof. She says, "Honey, there's a leak on the roof. Can you please fix it?" He says, "What do I look like, Bob Vila?" The next day, the husband comes home, and the roof is fixed. So is the plumbing. So is the car. He asks his wife what happened. "Oh, I had a handyman come in and fix them," she says. "Great! How much is that going to cost me?" he snarls. Wife says, "Nothing. He said he'd do it for free if I either baked him a cake or slept with him." Well, what kind of cake did you make?" asks the husband. "What do I look like?" she says. "Betty Crocker." A bus full of nuns falls off a cliff and they all die. They arrive at the gates of heaven and meet St. Peter. St. Peter says to them, "Sister Amishes, welcome to heaven. In a moment, I will let you all through the pearly gates. But before I may do that, I must ask each of you a single question. Please form a single file line." And they do so. St. Peter turns to the first nun in the line and asks her, "Sister, have you ever touched a penis?" The sister responds, "Well, there was this one time that I kind of sort of touched one with the tip of my pinky finger." St. Peter says, "All right, sister, now dip the tip of your pinky finger in the holy water and you may be admitted." And she did so. St. Peter now turns to the second nun and says, "Sister, have you ever touched a penis?" "Well, there was this one time that I held one for a moment." "All right, sister, now just wash your hands in the holy water and you may be admitted." And she does so. Now at this, there is a noise, a jostling in the line. It seems that one nun is trying to cut in front of another. St. Peter sees this and asks the nun, "Sister Susan, what is this? There is no rush." Sister Susan responds, "Well, if I'm going to have to gargle this stuff, I'd rather do it before Sister Mary sticks her ass in it." A lady goes to her parish priest one day and tells him, "Father, I have a problem. I have 2 female parrots, but they only know how to say one thing." "What do they say?" the priest inquired. "They say, 'Hi, we're prostitutes. Do you want to have some fun?'" the woman said embarrassingly. "That's obscene," the priest exclaimed. "I can see why you are embarrassed." He thought a minute and then said, "You know, I may have a solution to this problem. I have 2 male parrots whom I have taught to pray and read the Bible. Bring your 2 parrots over to my house, and we will put them in the cage with Francis and Job. My parrots can teach your parrots to praise and worship. I'm sure your parrots will stop saying that phrase in no time." "Thank you," the lady responded. "This may very well be the solution." The next day, she brought her female parrots to the priest's house. As he ushered her in, she saw his 2 male parrots were inside their cage, holding their rosary beads and praying. Impressed, she walked over and placed her parrots in with them. After just a couple of seconds, the female parrots exclaimed out in unison, "Hi, we're prostitutes. Do you want to have some fun?" There was a stunned silence. Finally, one male parrot looked over at the other male parrot and said, "Put the beads away, Francis. Our prayers have been answered."